The conference room fell silent as Jessica Martinez clicked to the final slide of her presentation. 27 slides showcasing revolutionary AI-powered medical diagnostic software that could detect early-stage cancer with 97% accuracy. The same software I had been developing in secret for the past 18 months. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Questions? Jessica asked, her voice dripping with confidence as she surveyed the room full of executives, investors, and patent attorneys. I sat in the back corner, my visitor's badge barely visible, watching my life's work being presented as someone else's genius. But Jessica had no idea who she was really dealing with. She thought I was just another junior developer who got lucky with a side project. Little did she know, I held 3 advanced degrees from MIT, had already filed preliminary patents under a shell company, and my father happened to be the chief technology officer at the largest medical device manufacturer in North America. But I let her continue. I let her take credit. I let her bask in the applause, because the bigger they think they are, the harder they fall. My name is Sarah Chen, and 3 years ago, I walked into Nexus Technologies wearing a simple blazer from Target and carrying a canvas bag I'd bought at a college bookstore. The HR representative, a middle-aged woman named Patricia who clearly judged people by their appearance, barely glanced up from her computer screen during my orientation. "You'll be working in the general development pool," Patricia had said, her tone suggesting this was exactly where someone like me belonged. Entry-level position. $42,000 a year. Don't expect any major projects for at least 2 years. I nodded politely, signed the paperwork, and accepted my temporary security badge. What Patricia didn't know, what nobody at Nexus knew, was that I had turned down senior engineering positions at Google, Apple, and Microsoft to be here. My MIT professors had called me insane. My advisor, Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, had personally tried to convince me to reconsider. "Sarah, you're throwing away opportunities that most engineers only dream of," she had said during our final meeting. "You could be leading major projects at any of these companies." But I had my reasons. Nexus Technologies was small enough that I could work on personal projects without triggering the intellectual property clauses that larger corporations love to bury in their employment contracts. I needed the freedom to develop my medical diagnostic software without corporate interference. The salary cut was temporary. The freedom was invaluable. My first day at Nexus, I was assigned to a cramped cubicle in the corner of the 3rd floor. The computer was ancient, the chair squeaked, and the fluorescent light above my desk flickered constantly. Perfect. Nobody pays attention to the person in the worst cubicle. Jessica Martinez occupied the corner office on the same floor. She was everything I wasn't, or rather, everything I chose not to appear to be. Designer clothes, perfectly styled hair, an MBA from Wharton, and a habit of name-dropping her connections during every conversation. She drove a BMW, vacationed in the Hamptons, and made sure everyone knew about both. "Oh, Sarah," she had said on my second day, stopping by my cubicle with her usual condescending smile. "I heard you went to some state school in California. How nice. I'm sure you'll learn a lot here." I had actually gone to UC Berkeley for my undergraduate degree before MIT, but I didn't correct her. Let her think what she wanted. Let everyone think what they wanted. Within my first week, I had mapped out the entire company structure, identified the key players, and assessed the technological capabilities of each department. Nexus had decent infrastructure but lacked vision. They specialized in basic business software solutions for mid-sized companies, accounting programs, inventory management systems, customer relationship databases. Nothing groundbreaking. Nothing that would change the world, which made it perfect for what I needed to accomplish. The medical diagnostic software I had been conceptualizing since my graduate studies required specific conditions to develop properly. I needed access to medical data, computing power, and most importantly, I needed to fly under the radar while I refined the algorithms. Large tech companies would have assigned teams to oversee my work, demanded regular progress reports, and ultimately claimed ownership of anything I created. At Nexus, I was invisible. Just another entry-level programmer working on maintenance updates for legacy systems. During my lunch breaks, I would walk to the small park across the street and call my father. Dr. Michael Chen had built his reputation by developing some of the most advanced medical imaging technologies in the industry. His company, MedTech Dynamics, held over 200 patents and supplied equipment to hospitals worldwide. "How's the corporate world treating you?" he would ask, and I could always hear the concern in his voice. He never understood why I had chosen this path. "It's exactly what I need, Dad. Trust me. You could have been leading a research team at MedTech by now. Your algorithm prototypes were impressive enough to warrant a full department." I'm not ready for that yet. There are still variables to test, edge cases to account for. I need more time to perfect the system before it goes commercial. What I didn't tell him was that I was using Nexus's resources far more extensively than anyone realized. During evening hours and weekends, when the building was nearly empty, I would access their servers and run complex calculations for my diagnostic software. The processing power required for machine learning algorithms was substantial, and Medtecha's systems would have logged every query, every test, every iteration. At Nexus, the IT department consisted of 2 overworked technicians who barely had time to handle basic maintenance requests, let alone monitor unusual server activity. As long as I didn't crash the system or interfere with daily operations, my computing experiments went completely unnoticed. My cubicle neighbor was a programmer named Kevin Walsh who had been with the company for 7 years. Kevin was competent, but uninspired, the kind of developer who wrote functional code but never pushed boundaries. He arrived at exactly 9 each morning, took lunch at exactly noon, and left at exactly 5:30. During our brief conversations, I learned that he had once harbored ambitions of creating innovative software but had gradually settled into the comfortable routine of maintenance programming. "You seem different from most new hires," Kevin had observed after my first month. "Most people your age are eager to impress management, volunteer for high-visibility projects, network with the executives. You just focus on your work." "I prefer to let my results speak for themselves," I had replied, which was partially true. Kevin had laughed. "Smart approach. Half the people here spend more time politicking than programming. Take Jessica, for example. She's gotten 3 promotions in 2 years, but I've never seen her write a single line of code that actually works." This insight proved valuable. Jessica Martinez had built her career at Nexus through strategic networking and taking credit for other people's work. She would identify promising projects in development, insert herself into the process at crucial moments, and then present the final results as her own achievements. Her corner office was decorated with awards and commendations that, upon closer examination, represented collaborative efforts where her actual contributions remained questionable. The "Innovation in Customer Relations Software" plaque on her wall corresponded to a database optimization project that Kevin had actually completed. The "Excellence in Project Management" certificate was for a mobile application that a contractor had developed entirely off-site. Jessica's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. She would wait until projects reached completion, then volunteer to handle the presentation and documentation phases. Since most programmers preferred coding to presenting, they willingly handed over the public-facing responsibilities. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Jessica would then craft compelling narratives about the development process, emphasizing her leadership and vision, while relegating the actual developers to supporting roles. The executives at Nexus, most of whom had business rather than technical backgrounds, were easily impressed by polished presentations and confident delivery. They saw Jessica as someone who could translate complex technical concepts into business value, which made her invaluable in their minds. But Jessica had never encountered a project like mine. I spent my evenings in the Nexus building developing algorithms that could analyze medical imaging data with unprecedented accuracy. The software incorporated advanced pattern recognition, neural network processing, and predictive modeling techniques that went far beyond anything Nexus had ever attempted. I was essentially conducting graduate-level research while maintaining the facade of an entry-level employee. The breakthrough came during my 15th month at the company. I had been working on a particularly challenging aspect of the diagnostic algorithm, teaching the software to differentiate between benign and malignant cellular patterns in CT scan images. The mathematics involved were complex, requiring integration of multiple data points and probability calculations that most medical professionals wouldn't understand, let alone replicate. After months of refinement, the algorithm achieved something remarkable: 97% accuracy in early-stage cancer detection, compared to the 78% accuracy rate of existing diagnostic methods. The implications were staggering. This software could revolutionize cancer treatment by identifying diseases years before traditional methods would detect them. I knew I had created something extraordinary, but I also knew I needed to be careful about how I proceeded. The software was too valuable to rush to market, and too important to let fall into the wrong hands. So I began documenting everything meticulously. Every line of code, every algorithm modification, every test result was saved with timestamps and detailed explanations. I created encrypted backups on external drives and stored them in a safety deposit box. I registered a shell company called Advanced Medical Solutions and began filing preliminary patent applications for the core technologies. Most importantly, I started bringing small components of the software to work, disguised as routine programming exercises. I've been experimenting with image recognition algorithms during my free time, I mentioned to Kevin one afternoon, showing him a simplified version of one subroutine. It's just a hobby project, but I think there might be commercial applications. Kevin examined the code with growing excitement. Sarah, this is incredible. The pattern matching capabilities are beyond anything I've seen. You should show this to management. I don't think I'm ready for that yet. It's still pretty rough around the edges. Are you kidding? This is the kind of innovation that could put Nexus on the map. We've been stuck doing basic business software for years. Something like this could open up entirely new markets. Word of my hobby project gradually spread through the development team. Other programmers would stop by my cubicle to examine the code samples I shared, offering suggestions and expressing admiration for the sophisticated algorithms. I carefully controlled these interactions, revealing just enough to generate interest while keeping the most valuable components hidden. Jessica Martinez first approached me on a Thursday afternoon in late October. I hear you've been working on some interesting side projects, she said, perching on the edge of my desk with practiced casualness. Medical imaging, right? That's exactly the kind of forward-thinking development that could benefit from proper project management support. I looked up from my computer screen, maintaining the slightly nervous expression I had cultivated for interactions with management. It's really just experimental code. Nothing ready for commercial development. That's exactly why you need someone with business experience to help guide the process. I've been thinking about expanding into healthcare technologies, and your algorithms could be the perfect foundation for a new product line. Jessica's smile was warm and encouraging, but her eyes held the calculating look I had observed during her previous acquisition campaigns. She had identified my project as her next target. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I'm not sure the company would be interested in something this speculative. Leave that to me. I have relationships with the executive team that could fast-track approval for a healthcare initiative. With my connections and your technical skills, we could build something really impressive. Over the following weeks, Jessica increased her involvement gradually. She would stop by my cubicle daily, asking about progress and offering to help with documentation. She requested copies of my code for backup purposes and began attending the informal discussions I had with other developers. I want to make sure I understand the full scope of what we're building, she explained when I hesitated to share certain algorithms. If we're going to present this to the executives, I need to be able to answer their questions accurately. The transition was so smooth that other team members began referring to it as Jessica's medical project, without realizing how the ownership had shifted. Jessica encouraged this perception, making statements like, "Sarah and I have been developing some revolutionary diagnostic software, and our team has achieved remarkable results in healthcare technology." By December, Jessica was scheduling meetings with department heads to discuss the commercial potential of her medical imaging project. She had prepared elaborate presentations showcasing the software's capabilities, complete with market analysis and revenue projections. My role in these meetings was limited to answering technical questions while Jessica handled the business strategy discussions. Sarah has done excellent work implementing the core algorithms, Jessica would say, but the real innovation lies in recognizing the commercial applications and developing a coherent product strategy. The executives were impressed. Jessica's polished presentations and confident delivery made the project seem ready for immediate commercialization. Plans were made for a formal product announcement, investor meetings, and patent applications, all under Jessica's leadership, but Jessica had made one critical error in her theft. She had focused so intensely on acquiring the visible components of my work that she never bothered to understand the underlying principles. She could present the software's capabilities convincingly, but she had no idea how the algorithms actually functioned, which meant she had no idea that the most important elements were still safely hidden in my encrypted files, protected by patents she knew nothing about, and backed by documentation she had never seen. She thought she had stolen my life's work. In reality, she had stolen an elaborate decoy while the real treasure remained completely beyond her reach. The betrayal began on a Monday morning in January when Jessica scheduled what she called a strategic planning meeting with the entire development team. I arrived to find the conference room filled with people I had never seen before, patent attorneys, potential investors, and executives from companies whose logos I recognized from medical technology trade publications. "Thank you all for coming," Jessica began, standing at the head of the polished oak table with a confidence that made my stomach turn. I'm excited to present the breakthrough medical diagnostic software that my team and I have been developing over the past 18 months. My team and I. The words hit like a physical blow, but I maintained my composure, sitting quietly in the back corner where Jessica had assigned me. She had specifically requested that I attend as technical support. In case anyone had detailed questions about implementation, the presentation unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. Jessica clicked through slides containing my algorithms, my research data, my breakthrough discoveries in pattern recognition technology. But every slide bore her name as the primary inventor and project leader. My contributions were relegated to a single bullet point near the end: implementation support provided by Sarah Chen and the development team. The software represents a quantum leap in early cancer detection, Jessica explained to the room full of potential investors. Current diagnostic methods achieve roughly 78% accuracy in identifying malignant cellular patterns. Our proprietary algorithm achieves 97% accuracy, potentially saving millions of lives through earlier intervention. Our proprietary algorithm. The phrase made my hands clench involuntarily under the table. That algorithm had consumed 18 months of my life. I had worked nights, weekends, and holidays to solve mathematical equations that most programmers couldn't even comprehend. I had tested thousands of variables, refined countless iterations, and overcome technical obstacles that would have defeated entire research teams, and now Jessica was presenting it as her own intellectual property. The commercial applications are extraordinary, she continued, advancing to a slide that showed projected revenue figures. Conservative estimates suggest this technology could generate over $200 million in licensing fees within the first 5 years. Major medical device manufacturers have already expressed interest in exclusive partnerships. Dr. Robert Harrison, a venture capitalist whose firm specialized in healthcare technologies, raised his hand. This is impressive work, Ms. Martinez. Can you walk us through the core mathematical principles that enable such high accuracy rates? Jessica's smile never wavered, but I caught the brief flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Sarah, would you mind explaining the technical implementation details for Dr. Harrison? I stood slowly, feeling the weight of 20 pairs of eyes focused on me. This was my moment to expose Jessica's theft, to reclaim my work, to set the record straight. But something held me back. Maybe it was curiosity about how far Jessica would push this deception. Maybe it was strategic patience. Or maybe I simply wanted to watch her dig herself deeper into a hole she couldn't escape. The algorithm incorporates advanced neural network processing with multi-layered pattern recognition capabilities, I said, providing a deliberately vague explanation that sounded impressive but revealed nothing substantive. The mathematical foundation relies on probability matrix calculations and predictive modeling techniques. Dr. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. And how long did it take your team to develop this breakthrough? 18 months of intensive research and development, Jessica answered before I could speak. It required significant innovation in both theoretical approach and practical implementation. The meeting continued for another hour, with Jessica fielding questions about market positioning, intellectual property protection, and commercialization strategy. She handled the business aspects competently, but whenever someone asked about technical specifics, she deflected to me or provided superficial answers that demonstrated her fundamental lack of understanding. As the attendees filed out, several investors approached Jessica to schedule follow-up meetings. Patent attorneys handed her business cards and discussed filing strategies. Dr. Harrison even mentioned the possibility of immediate funding for clinical trials. Congratulations, he told Jessica as he prepared to leave. This could be the breakthrough that revolutionizes early cancer detection. My firm would be very interested in discussing investment opportunities. After the room emptied, Jessica turned to me with the triumphant expression of someone who believed she had just secured her future. That went exceptionally well, she said, gathering her presentation materials. I think we can expect significant interest from multiple investors. This project is going to transform both our careers. Our careers? I asked quietly. Well, obviously. You'll continue in your current technical support role. But don't worry, there will definitely be opportunities for advancement as the project scales up. I'll make sure you're appropriately recognized for your implementation contributions. Implementation contributions. As if I had simply followed her instructions to write code for her revolutionary idea. Jessica, I said, choosing my words carefully, I want to make sure I understand the situation clearly. You're presenting this software as your intellectual property? I'm presenting it as a collaborative effort under my leadership, which is exactly what it was. I identified the market opportunity, developed the strategic framework, managed the development process, and created the business plan for commercialization. That's what leadership means, Sarah. The audacity was breathtaking. Jessica had rewritten history so completely that she seemed to genuinely believe her own fabrication. And the algorithms themselves? The mathematical foundations? The breakthrough discoveries in pattern recognition? Those were team efforts guided by my vision and strategic direction. Obviously, you contributed to the technical implementation, but the conceptual framework and innovative approach came from my analysis of market needs and technological possibilities. I stared at her for a long moment, memorizing every detail. Of her expression, the self-satisfied smile, the condescending tone, the complete absence of shame or acknowledgement. This conversation would be important later. I understand, I said finally. Thank you for clarifying your position. Over the following days, Jessica moved quickly to consolidate her ownership of the project. She scheduled meetings with patent attorneys to begin filing applications under her name. She reached out to medical technology companies about licensing agreements. She even started discussing equity arrangements with potential investors. Most devastatingly, she began systematically removing my access to the project files. For security purposes, she explained when I discovered that my login credentials no longer worked for the main development servers. Now that we're moving toward commercialization, we need to restrict access to essential personnel only. Don't worry, if I need any technical modifications, I'll let you know. Essential personnel. After 18 months of developing revolutionary medical software, I had been reclassified as non-essential support staff. Jessica also began spreading a revised version of the project's history throughout the company. In her new narrative, she had conceived the medical diagnostic software during her MBA studies at Wharton, developed the theoretical framework through independent research, and then assembled a technical team to implement her vision. Sarah did solid work following my specifications, she would tell colleagues who asked about my role. But the real innovation was recognizing the commercial potential and developing algorithms that could achieve unprecedented accuracy rates. The speed and thoroughness of Jessica's appropriation was almost impressive in its ruthlessness. Within 2 weeks, she had effectively erased my contributions from the official record and positioned herself as the sole inventor of breakthrough medical technology. But Jessica had made several critical errors in her rush to claim ownership. First, she had focused entirely on the software components I had deliberately shared, never realizing that the most sophisticated algorithms remained hidden in my encrypted files. The version she was presenting to investors was functional but limited, impressive enough to generate interest, but lacking the advanced capabilities that would be necessary for commercial success. Second, she had no understanding of the mathematical principles underlying the software. During investor meetings, her inability to answer technical questions was becoming increasingly obvious. She relied on me for explanations, but I had begun providing deliberately incomplete information that left crucial gaps in her understanding. Third, and most importantly, Jessica had no idea that I had been documenting everything from the beginning. Every conversation, every email, every iteration of the software development process was saved in multiple secure locations. I had timestamps proving when each algorithm was created, video recordings of my testing procedures, and detailed records of my breakthrough discoveries. Jessica thought she had stolen my life's work. In reality, she had stolen an elaborate preview while the real technology remained completely beyond her reach, but I wasn't ready to reveal any of this yet. I wanted to see how far Jessica would push her deception, how many lies she would tell, how many people she would deceive before I pulled the rug out from under her carefully constructed fraud, because the bigger the lie, the more satisfying the truth would be when it finally emerged. The following week, Jessica announced that she had secured preliminary interest from 3 major medical device manufacturers and 2 venture capital firms. Patent applications were being expedited through priority filing procedures. Clinical trials were being discussed with research hospitals. This is just the beginning, she told the assembled development team during our monthly meeting. Within 6 months, we'll be looking at licensing agreements worth tens of millions of dollars. This project is going to put Nexus Technologies on the map as a major player in medical technology. Kevin Walsh, my cubicle neighbor, raised his hand tentatively. What about Sarah's contributions? She did most of the actual programming work. Jessica's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Sarah provided valuable technical support during the implementation phase. She'll definitely be recognized appropriately when we finalize the intellectual property documentation. Recognized appropriately. The phrase was carefully chosen to sound generous while committing to nothing specific. After the meeting, Kevin approached me privately with obvious concern. This doesn't seem right, he said quietly. I watched you develop those algorithms from scratch. Jessica barely understands basic programming principles, let alone advanced pattern recognition mathematics. It's complicated, I replied, maintaining the slightly defeated tone I had cultivated over recent weeks. Jessica has been involved in the strategic planning from the beginning. Maybe her contributions were more significant than I realized. Kevin looked skeptical but didn't press the issue. Like most of my colleagues, he assumed that corporate politics had simply overwhelmed technical merit, an unfortunately common occurrence in the business world, but what none of them knew was that Jessica's theft had triggered something much larger than a simple workplace dispute over project ownership. My father, Dr. Michael Chen, had been quietly monitoring the situation since I first mentioned Jessica's increasing involvement in my project. As Chief Technology Officer at MedTech Dynamics, he had extensive connections throughout the medical device industry. When Jessica began reaching out to potential licensing partners, several of those contacts had forwarded her communications to him for evaluation. The technology she's describing is remarkably similar to the algorithms you've been developing, he had mentioned during one of our weekly phone conversations. Almost identical, actually. That's interesting, I had replied carefully, knowing that our calls were likely monitored by Nexus's basic security systems. Very interesting. Especially since the patent applications she's filing seem to be missing crucial mathematical components that would be necessary for the software to function at the accuracy levels she's claiming. My father was beginning to understand that something was seriously wrong with Jessica's claims of ownership. But he didn't yet know the full extent of my preparations for this exact situation. The trap was set. Jessica had committed to promises she couldn't keep, claimed ownership of technology she didn't understand, and staked her entire career on software that would never work without the algorithms she had no access to. All that remained was choosing the perfect moment to spring it. 3 weeks after Jessica's triumphant investor presentation, the first cracks in her carefully constructed facade began to show. It started with a seemingly innocent question during a follow-up meeting with Dr. Harrison's venture capital firm. "We've had our technical team review the preliminary algorithms you provided," Dr. Harrison said, his tone more cautious than it had been during the initial presentation. "They're raising some concerns about scalability and processing efficiency. Could you walk us through the optimization strategies you've implemented?" Jessica's confident smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "Sarah, would you mind addressing Dr. Harrison's technical concerns?" I had been expecting this moment. For weeks, I had been watching Jessica struggle with increasingly complex questions that exposed the gaps in her understanding. Now, sitting in this conference room full of investors and technical experts, I made my first deliberate move. "I'd be happy to explain," I said, standing up with a tablet containing notes I had carefully prepared. "The algorithm architecture incorporates several optimization techniques, but there are some fundamental limitations that need to be addressed before commercial deployment." Jessica's eyes widened slightly. This wasn't the supportive explanation she had been expecting. "The current implementation achieves high accuracy rates under controlled testing conditions," I continued, "but real-world deployment would require additional computational resources and algorithm refinements that aren't included in the current version." Dr. Harrison leaned forward with interest. "What kind of refinements are we talking about?" "Primarily in the neural network processing layers and the predictive modeling subroutines. The mathematical foundations would need to be completely restructured to handle the volume and variability of data that clinical implementation would require." The room fell silent. Jessica's face had gone pale as she realized that instead of supporting her presentation, I was systematically undermining it. "Sarah," she said carefully, "I think you might be overcomplicating the technical requirements. The algorithm has consistently achieved 97% accuracy in our testing phases." "In limited testing phases," I corrected gently. "With carefully curated datasets and controlled variables. Clinical deployment would involve significantly more complex scenarios." Dr. Harrison's technical advisor, a woman named Dr. Linda Foster who held advanced degrees in both computer science and biomedical engineering, had been taking notes throughout the exchange. Now she looked up with sharp attention. "Ms. Chen, you seem to have a very detailed understanding of the algorithm's limitations. In your opinion, how much additional development would be required for commercial viability?" This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment to plant the first seeds of doubt about Jessica's claims while positioning myself as the technical expert who actually understood the software. "That's difficult to estimate without access to the complete algorithm specifications," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Much of the advanced functionality exists in proprietary modules that aren't included in the current demonstration version." Jessica's confusion was obvious. "What proprietary modules?" "The algorithm is complete as presented. The version you've been showing investors represents the core functionality," I explained, maintaining a respectful tone while delivering devastating information. But the mathematical optimizations that enable clinical-grade accuracy are maintained separately. For security purposes. Dr. Foster's eyes sharpened. Are you saying that the algorithm version we've been evaluating doesn't include the full functionality? The demonstration version includes enough functionality to showcase the concept and basic capabilities. But the advanced pattern recognition algorithms, the predictive modeling enhancements, and the real-time processing optimizations are maintained in secure development environments. The implications hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Jessica had been presenting incomplete software while claiming it represented a finished, commercial-ready product. Jessica, Dr. Harrison said slowly, why weren't we informed that we were evaluating a limited demonstration version rather than the complete algorithm? Jessica's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. The version we presented includes all the core functionality. Sarah might be referring to minor optimization routines that don't significantly impact performance. Minor optimization routines? Dr. Foster's voice carried a note of skepticism. Ms. Chen, are these minor optimizations necessary for achieving the 97% accuracy rates that have been promised? I pretended to consider the question carefully. The demonstration version can achieve high accuracy under ideal conditions. But for consistent clinical performance, yes, the additional algorithms are essential. The meeting deteriorated rapidly. From there, Dr. Harrison requested immediate access to the complete algorithm specifications. Jessica claimed that security protocols prevented her from sharing the proprietary modules without additional legal protections. Dr. Foster suggested that their technical evaluation had been based on incomplete information. Within an hour, 3 separate investor groups had postponed their funding decisions pending clarification of the algorithm's actual capabilities. Jessica confronted me immediately after the meeting, her composed professional demeanor finally cracking. What the hell was that? She hissed as we walked toward the elevator. You completely undermined the presentation. These investors were ready to commit funding, and now they're backing away because of your technical nitpicking. I answered their questions honestly, I replied calmly. They asked about limitations and optimization requirements. Should I have lied? You should have been supportive. We're supposed to be on the same team here. Are we? Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you've made it very clear that this is your project, your technology, and your intellectual property. I'm just providing technical support, remember? Jessica stared at me with growing suspicion. What's that supposed to mean? It means that if you're claiming ownership of the technology, then you should be able to answer technical questions about it. I shouldn't need to explain your own algorithms to potential investors. The elevator arrived, and we rode down in tense silence. But I could see the wheels turning in Jessica's mind. For the first time, she was beginning to realize that her theft might not be as complete as she had assumed. Over the next few days, Jessica became increasingly frantic in her attempts to regain control of the situation. She scheduled emergency meetings with the development team, demanding access to all algorithm components and supporting documentation. She contacted patent attorneys to expedite filing processes. She even tried to convince the executives at Nexus to restrict my communications with outside parties. We need to maintain better control over our intellectual property, she told department head Marcus Webb during a meeting I wasn't invited to but heard about through Kevin. Having junior developers speak directly with investors creates unnecessary confusion and potential security risks. But Marcus Webb, despite his limited technical background, wasn't entirely naive. He had noticed the growing tension between Jessica and me, and more importantly, he had received several calls from potential investors asking detailed questions about the development team and project leadership. Jessica, these investors are specifically asking to speak with the technical developers, he told her. They want to understand the algorithm from the people who actually wrote the code. That seems like a reasonable request. I can provide all the technical explanations they need. I've been managing this project from the beginning and have comprehensive knowledge of every component. Then why do you keep deferring to Sarah during technical discussions? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Jessica's carefully constructed narrative was beginning to unravel under scrutiny. Meanwhile, I had begun taking more aggressive steps to protect my actual intellectual property. During my lunch breaks, I would walk to a small cafe 3 blocks from the office and use their Wi-Fi to communicate with patent attorneys, upload encrypted documentation to secure cloud servers, and coordinate with my father about the growing situation. Dr. Michael Chen had been conducting his own investigation into Jessica's claims, and what he discovered was both fascinating and damning. She's been shopping your algorithm to every major medical device manufacturer on the East Coast, he told me during one of our secure phone conversations. But the specifications she's providing don't match the performance claims in her presentations. What do you mean? The algorithm fragments she's shared are mathematically incomplete. They couldn't possibly achieve the accuracy rates she's promising. Several companies have already identified the gaps and are questioning whether she actually understands the technology she's trying to license. This information confirmed what I had suspected. Jessica had stolen the visible components of my work, the code I had deliberately shared, the documentation I had created for demonstration purposes, the test results from controlled experiments. But she had no access to the sophisticated algorithms that made the software actually function at revolutionary levels. There's something else, my father continued. Her patent applications are being flagged by the review process. Flagged how? Apparently, there are existing provisional patents that cover some of the core technologies she's trying to claim. The patent office is requiring additional documentation to prove her claims of original invention. My heart rate increased. The provisional patents my shell company had filed months earlier were beginning to surface in the review process. What happens next? She'll need to provide detailed evidence of her development process, including dated documentation, prototype iterations, and proof of original creation. If she can't substantiate her claims, the applications will be rejected. I smiled grimly. Jessica had no idea that the patent office was about to demand proof she couldn't possibly provide. The crisis came to a head the following week when Dr. Harrison's firm requested a comprehensive technical demonstration of the complete algorithm. They wanted to see the software processing real medical data, achieving the promised accuracy rates, and handling the computational requirements of clinical deployment. We need to schedule this demonstration as quickly as possible, Jessica told me during an emergency meeting. Dr. Harrison's firm is our primary funding source, and we can't afford to lose their commitment. That might be challenging, I said carefully. The complete algorithm requires specific hardware configurations and security protocols that aren't available on our standard development systems. What kind of hardware configurations? High-performance computing clusters with specialized medical data processing capabilities. The advanced algorithms consume significantly more computational resources than the demonstration version. Jessica's frustration was becoming obvious. Where are these advanced algorithms? I need to understand exactly what components we're dealing with. They're maintained in secure development environments for intellectual property protection. Access requires specific authorization protocols. I'm the project leader. I should have access to everything. Of course, I agreed. You'll need to contact the administrators of the secure development systems and request access credentials. Who are the administrators? The external security firm that manages our intellectual property protection services. Jessica stared at me with growing suspicion. What external security firm? I've never heard of any external IP protection services. Advanced Medical Solutions. They're a specialized firm that handles patent development and intellectual property security for medical technology projects. The name hit Jessica like a physical blow. Advanced Medical Solutions was the shell company I had created to file provisional patents, but Jessica had no way of knowing that. How long have they been involved in this project? Since the initial development phases. They've been managing the patent preparation and IP security protocols from the beginning. Why wasn't I informed about this arrangement? I assumed you were aware of the IP protection protocols. Advanced Medical Solutions has been handling all the patent filings and documentation security for the advanced algorithm components. Jessica's face had gone white. For the first time, she was beginning to understand that there were aspects of her project that she knew nothing about. I need you to contact this Advanced Medical Solutions immediately and get me full access to all algorithm components, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. I'll certainly try, I replied. But they have very strict security protocols for intellectual property protection. It might take some time to arrange appropriate access. How much time? That depends on their verification procedures for new access requests. Jessica stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the moment when suspicion crystallized into certainty. She knew something was wrong. She knew I wasn't the helpless junior developer she had assumed me to be, but she didn't yet understand the full extent of what she was facing. Sarah, she said slowly, I think we need to have a more detailed conversation about this project's development history. Of course, I agreed. I'm happy to provide whatever clarification you need. But privately, I was thinking that Jessica was absolutely right. We definitely needed to have a detailed conversation about the development history. It was time for her to learn exactly who she had tried to steal from. The confrontation Jessica had demanded took place the following morning in her corner office. She had arrived early, obviously having spent the night researching advanced medical solutions and finding absolutely nothing. The company existed only as a legal entity with minimal public presence, exactly as I had designed it. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, Jessica began, her tone carefully controlled but with an undercurrent of barely contained anxiety. This advanced medical solutions firm you mentioned, I can't find any record of our company having a contract with them. I settled into the chair across from her desk, maintaining the slightly puzzled expression I had perfected over months of these interactions. That's strange. They've been handling the intellectual property security for the advanced algorithm components since the early development phases. Sarah, I've reviewed every contract, every vendor agreement, every external service arrangement. In our department files, there is no advanced medical solutions. They might be listed under a different classification. IP security firms often operate under specialized legal frameworks that don't appear in standard vendor databases. Jessica's eyes narrowed. I want you to call them right now. I want to speak directly with whoever is managing these alleged advanced algorithm components. Of course, I agreed, pulling out my phone. Though they typically require scheduled appointments for security briefings. I dialed the number for Advanced Medical Solutions, which was actually a forwarding service that routed to a secure voicemail system I had established months earlier. After 3 rings, an automated voice answered. Advanced Medical Solutions? Intellectual Property Security Division. Your call is important to us. Please leave a detailed message including your full name, company affiliation, and the nature of your inquiry. All messages will be reviewed for security clearance before response. I looked at Jessica with what I hoped appeared to be genuine confusion. That's odd. Usually there's a live operator during business hours. Leave a message, Jessica ordered. Tell them we need immediate access to all algorithm components for the Nexus Technologies medical diagnostic project. I spoke into the phone, following Jessica's instructions while she listened intently. This is Sarah Chen from Nexus Technologies. We need to schedule urgent access to the secure algorithm components for our medical diagnostic software project. Please contact us as soon as possible regarding access protocols for Jessica Martinez, our project leader. After ending the call, I turned back to Jessica. They usually respond within 24 hours, though urgent requests sometimes get faster. Attention. 24 hours? Jessica's voice rose slightly. We have a critical investor demonstration scheduled for next week. We need those algorithm components immediately. I understand the timeline pressure, I said sympathetically. But Advanced Medical Solutions takes intellectual property security very seriously. They won't compromise their protocols, even for urgent business needs. Jessica stood up abruptly and began pacing behind her desk. This is unacceptable. We're talking about algorithms that I developed, managed, and own. No external security firm should be preventing me from accessing my own intellectual property. Your intellectual property? I asked quietly. Yes, my intellectual property. I've been leading this project from conception through development. Every algorithm, every breakthrough, every innovation has been guided by my vision and strategic direction. I nodded slowly, as if considering her words. You're absolutely right. If these are your algorithms, then Advanced Medical Solutions should have records of your involvement in the development process. Exactly. They'll probably want to verify your claims by reviewing your original development documentation, prototype iterations, and patent preparation materials. Jessica's pacing stopped abruptly. What kind of documentation? The usual intellectual property verification requirements. Dated code versions, algorithm development logs, mathematical derivation notes, prototype testing records. The kind of detailed documentation that proves original invention. I have all of that, Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. Excellent. Advanced Medical Solutions will want to cross-reference your documentation with their security records to verify consistency. Jessica returned to her chair, and I could see her mind racing as she tried to figure out how to navigate this increasingly complex situation. Sarah, I want you to be completely honest with me about something. Of course. How long have you been in contact with Advanced Medical Solutions? Since the early stages of algorithm development. They were brought in to handle patent preparation and intellectual property security when it became clear that the software had significant commercial potential. Who authorized that arrangement? I assumed you had, since you were managing the project's strategic development. Jessica's frustration was becoming more obvious. I never authorized any external IP security firm. I've never even heard of Advanced Medical Solutions until yesterday. That is puzzling, I agreed. Maybe the arrangement was set up through a different authorization channel. Sometimes patent security protocols are handled at the corporate level rather than the project level. I'm going to contact Marcus Webb immediately. He'll be able to clarify what external firms have been authorized for this project. That's a good idea, I said. Though you might want to wait until Advanced Medical Solutions responds to our message. If there's been some kind of miscommunication about authorization protocols, it would be better to resolve it directly with them first. Jessica considered this. Why would it be better to resolve it with them first? Well, if there's been an unauthorized security arrangement, that could raise questions about intellectual property protection protocols. Corporate management tends to be very sensitive about IP security issues. The implication hung in the air. If Jessica escalated this to Marcus Webb without understanding the situation fully, she might inadvertently expose problems with the project's IP management, problems that could reflect poorly on her leadership. Fine, Jessica said after a moment. We'll wait for their response. But I want you to call them again this afternoon if we don't hear back. This situation needs to be resolved immediately. Over the next 24 hours, Jessica's anxiety reached visible levels. She made repeated calls to Advanced Medical Solutions, each time reaching the same automated voicemail system. She researched intellectual property security firms, trying to find any trace of the company that allegedly controlled access to her algorithms. She even contacted several patent attorneys to ask about IP security protocols and external management arrangements. Meanwhile, I continued my daily routine, working on routine programming tasks while monitoring Jessica's increasingly frantic efforts to regain control of the situation. During lunch breaks, I would walk to the cafe and use my encrypted communication systems to coordinate the next phases of my strategy. The response from Advanced Medical Solutions came exactly 24 hours after Jessica's demand, delivered via email to both of us. Dear Ms. Martinez and Ms. Chen, thank you for your inquiry regarding access to secure intellectual property components for the Nexus Technologies medical diagnostic project. After reviewing our records, we have identified several important security concerns that must be addressed before any access can be granted. Our files indicate that Ms. Sarah Chen is listed as the primary inventor and authorized representative for all algorithm components under our protection. Ms. Jessica Martinez is not currently listed as an authorized party for this intellectual property. Before we can process any access requests for Ms. Martinez, we will require the following documentation: detailed development history proving Ms. Martinez's involvement in original algorithm creation, dated prototype versions showing Ms. Martinez's contributions to mathematical frameworks patent preparation, materials demonstrating Ms. Martinez's role in intellectual property development, legal authorization from Ms. Chen transferring IP access rights to Ms. Martinez. Please provide this documentation within 5 business days for our security review. Until this verification process is complete, all algorithm components will remain under restricted access protocols. Sincerely, Dr. Amanda Richardson, Director of Intellectual Property Security, Advanced Medical Solutions. Jessica read the email 3 times before looking up at me with an expression that combined shock, fury, and growing understanding. You're listed as the primary inventor, she said slowly. That must be a mistake in their records, I replied. I can contact them to clarify the situation. A mistake? Jessica's voice was rising. How does a security firm accidentally list the wrong person as the primary inventor of algorithms worth millions of dollars? Maybe there was confusion during the initial setup process. Since I was handling the technical implementation, they might have misunderstood my role in the project. Technical implementation? Jessica stood up again, her composure finally cracking completely. Sarah, I want a straight answer. What exactly is your relationship with Advanced Medical Solutions? This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when Jessica would finally demand the truth that would destroy her carefully constructed theft. My relationship with Advanced Medical Solutions? I repeated her question thoughtfully. Well, I suppose you could say I'm a client. A client? What kind of client? The kind that needs intellectual property security services for valuable medical technology algorithms. Jessica stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the pieces finally starting to fall into place in her mind. Sarah, she said very slowly, are you telling me that you've been working with an external security firm to protect algorithms that you claim to have developed independently? I'm telling you that I've been working with a security firm to protect algorithms that I did develop independently. But this is a company project. Anything you develop using company resources belongs to Nexus Technologies. That would be true if I had developed the algorithms using company resources. Jessica's face went pale. What do you mean? I mean that the revolutionary medical diagnostic software you've been presenting to investors was developed entirely on my own time, using my own equipment, and funded through my own resources. Nexus Technologies has no ownership claim to any of the core algorithms. That's impossible. You've been working on this project here, during company time, using company computers. I've been working on demonstration versions and simplified implementations. During company time. The actual breakthrough algorithms were developed independently and remain my personal intellectual property. Jessica sank back into her chair as the full implications began to dawn on her. You're saying that the software I've been presenting to investors doesn't actually belong to Nexus Technologies? The demonstration versions you've been presenting belong to Nexus, since they were created using company resources. But those demonstration versions don't include the advanced algorithms that enable clinical-grade performance. The advanced algorithms that you claim to own independently. The advanced algorithms that I do own independently, as evidenced by the provisional patents filed months before you ever became involved in this project. Jessica's mouth fell open. Provisional patents? Filed through Advanced Medical Solutions. In my name, covering all the core mathematical frameworks and processing techniques that make the software actually functional. You filed patents behind my back. I filed patents to protect my intellectual property before sharing demonstration versions with colleagues. Jessica was silent for several minutes, clearly trying to process the magnitude of what I had just revealed. Sarah, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, are you telling me that I've been presenting technology to investors that I don't actually own? You own the demonstration versions and the basic implementations that were created using Nexus resources. But the core technology that enables the breakthrough performance you've been promising? That remains my personal intellectual property. But the investors, the licensing agreements, the patent applications I've been filing, will need to be substantially revised once the intellectual property ownership issues are clarified. Jessica put her head in her hands. This is a disaster. I've made commitments to investors based on technology that apparently doesn't belong to the company. It's certainly a complex situation, I agreed. Complex? Jessica looked up with desperation in her eyes. Sarah, I need you to transfer the intellectual property rights to Nexus immediately. The company's reputation is at stake, and my career could be destroyed if these investor commitments fall through. That's an interesting request, I said carefully. Especially considering that just a few weeks ago, you were presenting this technology as your own innovation and relegating me to a technical support role. I was protecting the project's commercial viability by providing proper business leadership and strategic direction. And now you want me to transfer ownership of my intellectual property to resolve the problems your business leadership has created? Jessica's desperation was becoming more apparent. Sarah, we can work out an arrangement that recognizes your contributions appropriately. Equity participation, licensing fees, co-inventor status on patents. But we need to resolve this ownership issue before it destroys the entire project. Co-inventor status? I couldn't keep the slight smile off my face. On patents for algorithms that I developed entirely independently? You know what I mean. We can structure an arrangement that benefits everyone involved. Everyone meaning you, me, and Nexus Technologies? Yes, exactly. I stood up slowly, gathering my thoughts before delivering the final blow to Jessica's remaining hopes. Jessica, there's something else you should know about Advanced Medical Solutions. What now? It's my company. I created it specifically to protect the intellectual property for my medical diagnostic software. Every patent filing, every security protocol, every access restriction, all of it is under my direct control. Jessica stared at me in complete silence for nearly a minute. Your company, she finally whispered. My company. Which means that every algorithm you've been presenting to investors, every breakthrough you've been claiming credit for, every piece of technology you've been promising to license, all of it is protected by patents that I own completely. But that means you've been trying to sell technology that you have no legal right to license, claim, or even access without my explicit permission. Jessica's face had turned ashen. Sarah, you have to understand, I never intended to steal anything from you. I was just trying to provide proper business leadership for a promising technology project. Business leadership for technology that didn't belong to you, that you didn't understand, and that you had no authority to commercialize. I didn't know. You never told me that you owned the intellectual property independently. You never asked. You just assumed that because I was working in a junior position, anything I created automatically belonged to you or the company. Jessica was quiet for a long time, clearly trying to figure out if there was any way to salvage the situation. What do you want? She finally asked. What do I want? To resolve this situation. To protect both our careers. To make sure this breakthrough technology gets the proper commercial development it deserves. I smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. Jessica, I think you're still misunderstanding the situation. This isn't a negotiation between equals. You've spent weeks claiming credit for my work, presenting it as your own innovation, and trying to build your career on stolen intellectual property. I was providing strategic leadership, you were committing fraud. The word hung in the air, between us like a bomb. Now, I continued, the question isn't what I want from you. The question is what consequences you're going to face for trying to steal technology worth potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. Jessica's desperation was complete. Sarah, please, we can work this out. I'll give you full credit for the algorithms. We can restructure the entire project under your leadership. Just don't destroy everything we've built. Everything we've built? I laughed. Jessica, you haven't built anything. You've stolen incomplete demonstration software and tried to pass it off as revolutionary technology you didn't understand. But the investors, the licensing deals, will have to be informed that you've been presenting technology you had no right to claim. Jessica looked like she might cry. That will destroy my career. Yes, I agreed. It probably will. The revelation of my true identity began the next morning when I walked into Nexus Technologies wearing a tailored Armani suit instead of my usual Target blazer. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable, from overlooked junior developer to someone who clearly belonged in boardrooms and executive meetings. Patricia from HR did a double take when she saw me step off the elevator. Sarah? You look different today. Thank you, Patricia. I have some important meetings scheduled. Kevin Walsh nearly dropped his coffee when I passed his cubicle. Wow, Sarah. Big presentation. Today? Something like that, I replied with a smile that carried implications he couldn't yet understand, but it was Jessica's reaction that made the entire wardrobe change worthwhile. When she saw me walking toward her office, her face went through a fascinating sequence of emotions: confusion, recognition, and finally, dawning terror. We need to talk, I said, settling into the chair across from her desk with a confidence that made her visibly uncomfortable. Sarah, about yesterday's conversation was just the beginning, Jessica. Today, you're going to learn exactly who you've been trying to steal from. I pulled out my tablet and opened a secure folder containing documentation that would reshape Jessica's understanding of everything that had happened over the past 18 months. Let's start with my educational background, I said, turning the screen toward her. MIT, class of 2018. Bachelor's degree in computer science with a specialty in artificial intelligence. Graduated summa cum laude with a thesis on neural network applications in medical diagnostic systems. Jessica's eyes widened as she read the official transcripts displayed on the screen. MIT, class of 2020. Master's degree in biomedical engineering with a focus on diagnostic imaging technologies. Research published in the Journal of Medical Innovation and the International Review of Biomedical Computing. I scrolled to the next document. MIT, class of 2022. Doctorate in computer science with a dissertation titled Advanced Pattern Recognition Algorithms for Early-Stage Cancer Detection in Medical Imaging Systems. Jessica's face had gone completely pale. You have a PhD from MIT? 3 degrees from MIT, actually. All focused on exactly the technology you've been trying to claim as your own. I opened another folder. But education is just the foundation. Let me show you what I've accomplished professionally. The screen filled with a comprehensive resume that bore no resemblance to the entry-level application Jessica thought she knew. Senior research position at Google's Medical AI Division, 2019 to 2021. Led a team of 12 engineers developing diagnostic imaging software for early disease detection. Patent holder for 17 different algorithm innovations in medical pattern recognition. Jessica's mouth fell open. You worked at Google? Principal engineer at Apple's Health Technologies Division, 2021 to 2022. Developed breakthrough software for real-time medical monitoring using consumer devices. Co-inventor on 12 patents covering wearable diagnostic technologies. I scrolled to the next section. Lead researcher at Microsoft's Healthcare Innovation Lab, 2022 to 2023. Created artificial intelligence systems for predictive medical diagnosis. Published author of 23 peer-reviewed papers in top-tier medical and computer science journals. This is impossible, Jessica whispered. If you have credentials like this, why are you working as an entry-level developer at Nexus Technologies? Because I needed a controlled environment to develop revolutionary medical diagnostic software without corporate interference. Large tech companies would have claimed ownership of anything I created, assigned teams to oversee my work, and rushed the technology to market before it was properly refined. I opened another document folder. But the most important thing you need to understand, Jessica, is that I didn't just develop the algorithms you've been stealing. I've been documenting every aspect of your theft for months." The screen displayed a comprehensive archive of emails, meeting recordings, and time-stamped communications that chronicled Jessica's systematic appropriation of my work. "Here's the email where you first requested access to my hobby project, algorithm samples." Jessica's own words appeared on the screen. "I've been thinking about expanding into healthcare technologies, and your algorithms could be the perfect foundation for a new product line. Here's the recording from our first meeting where you claimed the project would benefit from your business experience and strategic guidance." Jessica's voice played from the tablet's speakers. "With my connections and your technical skills, we could build something really impressive. And here's the video documentation of you systematically removing my access to project files while claiming the technology as your own intellectual property." A series of security camera recordings showed Jessica at her computer, changing passwords, modifying file permissions, and updating project documentation to reflect her ownership claims. Jessica watched the evidence accumulate with growing horror. "How did you get access to security camera footage?" "I've had unrestricted access to Nexus's entire digital infrastructure since my second week here. The IT security at this company is laughably inadequate for someone with my background." I opened yet another folder. "But surveillance footage is just the beginning. Let me show you the most damaging evidence of your fraud." The screen filled with side-by-side patent applications, Jessica's recent filings compared to my provisional patents filed months earlier. "These are the patent applications you submitted to the USPTO 3 weeks ago, claiming original invention of medical diagnostic algorithms." Jessica's applications were displayed in detail, showing her name as the primary inventor and Nexus Technologies as the assignee. "And these are my provisional patent applications, filed 8 months before you ever became involved in this project." The provisional patents covered every algorithm, every mathematical framework, and every processing technique that Jessica had tried to claim. The timestamps made it clear that my innovations predated her involvement by nearly a year. "The patent office is going to be very interested in this comparison," I continued. "Patent fraud is a federal crime, Jessica. People go to prison for this." Jessica's desperation was complete. "Sarah, I didn't know about your provisional patents. If I had known you already owned the intellectual property, I never would have filed competing applications. You didn't know because you never bothered to research the technology you were stealing. You saw impressive algorithms, assumed they were available for appropriation, and built your entire career strategy around claiming credit for work you couldn't possibly have created." I opened the final folder on my tablet. "But the most important revelation, Jessica, is who my father is." Jessica looked confused. "Your father?" "Dr. Michael Chen, Chief Technology Officer of MedTech Dynamics, the largest medical device manufacturer in North America. The company that holds over 200 patents in medical imaging technology and supplies diagnostic equipment to hospitals worldwide." Jessica's face went ashen as the implications sank in. "You've been trying to license stolen medical technology to companies that report directly to my father. Every licensing proposal you've submitted, every investor presentation you've given, every patent application you've filed, all of it has been forwarded to Dr. Michael Chen for technical evaluation." "Oh my God," Jessica whispered. "My father has been monitoring your activities for weeks, Jessica. He knows about every lie you've told, every claim you've made, and every piece of technology you've tried to steal. And now he's going to take action." I stood up and walked to Jessica's window, looking out at the parking lot where a black sedan had just arrived. "In fact, he's here right now." Jessica joined me at the window and watched as my father stepped out of the sedan, accompanied by 2 men in expensive suits who were clearly lawyers, and a woman carrying a briefcase who appeared to be some kind of federal investigator. "Dr. Michael Chen has requested an immediate meeting with Nexus Technologies executives to discuss serious intellectual property violations involving stolen medical technology," I said calmly. "He's brought patent attorneys and federal investigators to ensure that all legal protocols are followed properly." Jessica's legs seemed to give out, and she collapsed back into her chair. "Sarah, please, you have to help me. I'll give you full credit for everything. I'll transfer all the patents to your name. I'll tell the investors that you're the real inventor. Just don't let this destroy my career." "Jessica, you seem to be under the impression that you have something to offer me. You don't understand, you never owned anything to begin with. Every algorithm, every breakthrough, every piece of technology you've been claiming was mine from the moment of creation. But the investors, the licensing deals, will have to be informed that they've been negotiating with someone who had no authority to represent the technology in question." I gathered my tablet and prepared to leave Jessica's office. "The meeting with my father and the federal investigators starts in 10 minutes. I suggest you spend that time deciding whether you want to cooperate with the investigation or continue denying your theft of federal patent-protected technology. Federal patent-protected technology? Did I forget to mention that my medical diagnostic algorithms have potential military applications? The Department of Defense has been monitoring this technology for national security purposes. When patent fraud involves technology with military significance, federal investigators take a very personal interest in the case. Jessica's remaining color drained from her face. Military applications? Early cancer detection technology can be adapted for biological warfare defense systems. Which means your theft doesn't just involve intellectual property violations, it involves potential national security breaches. I paused at her office door. One more thing, Jessica. Remember when you told me I went to some state school in California, and that I'd learn a lot working at Nexus? Jessica nodded weakly. I did learn a lot. I learned that people like you exist, people who are so consumed by greed and ambition that they'll steal anything that isn't nailed down. I learned that success and competence don't always correlate with character and integrity. And most importantly, I learned that sometimes the best way to deal with theft is to let the thief think they've succeeded right up until the moment you destroy them completely. I opened the door to leave, then turned back for one final observation. Oh, and Jessica? That some state school in California I attended was UC Berkeley, ranked number 1 in computer science worldwide. I graduated valedictorian before moving on to MIT for my graduate work. But thank you for the motivation to show you exactly what someone from a state school can accomplish when properly motivated. As I walked toward the elevator, I could hear Jessica's muffled sobs coming from her office. By the time the elevator doors closed, she had started making frantic phone calls, probably to lawyers, though I doubted any lawyer could help her at this point. The meeting with my father and the federal investigators was scheduled to begin in Marcus Webb's conference room in 8 minutes. Jessica would soon discover that her problems extended far beyond patent fraud and intellectual property theft, because when you steal technology with potential national security applications from the daughter of one of the most powerful figures in the medical device industry, the consequences go well beyond career damage. They become federal crimes with prison sentences. But as I walked toward the conference room where my father was waiting, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. After 18 months of careful planning, meticulous documentation, and strategic patience, Jessica Martinez was about to face the full consequences of trying to steal from someone she should never have underestimated. The biggest revelation, however, was still to come. Because Jessica didn't yet know about the comprehensive investigation that had been building around her activities, or the federal charges that were about to be filed, or the fact that several other major technology companies had already been contacted about similar theft patterns in Jessica's employment history, she thought she was facing the consequences of stealing one project. She was actually facing the consequences of a career built entirely on intellectual property theft, a career that multiple federal agencies had been investigating for months, but I'd let her discover that particular truth during the formal interrogation. That was about to begin. The conference room at Nexus Technologies had never hosted anything like the meeting that began at precisely 2 p.m. that afternoon. Marcus Webb sat at the head of the table, his usual confidence replaced by visible nervousness as he faced an array of federal investigators, patent attorneys, and corporate executives whose combined legal power could destroy his company. My father, Dr. Michael Chen, commanded the room with the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades at the pinnacle of medical technology innovation. Beside him sat Rachel Morrison, senior patent attorney from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and Agent David Sullivan from the FBI's Intellectual Property Crime Unit. Jessica entered the room 10 minutes late, clearly having spent the time attempting to repair her appearance and compose herself. Her efforts had been largely unsuccessful. Her hands shook as she poured water from the pitcher, and her usual confident demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled panic. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, though his tone suggested he would have preferred to be anywhere else. "I understand there are some concerns regarding intellectual property issues with one of our development projects." Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Webb, this goes considerably beyond concerns. We're here to address systematic patent fraud, intellectual property theft, and potential federal crimes involving technology with national security implications." Agent Sullivan opened a thick folder and placed several documents on the table. "Ms. Martinez, we need to discuss the patent applications you filed 3 weeks ago with the USPTO, claiming original invention of medical diagnostic algorithms." Jessica's voice was barely audible. "What about them?" "These algorithms are covered by existing provisional patents filed 8 months before your applications. Patents held by Dr. Sarah Chen through her company, Advanced Medical Solutions." Rachel Morrison spread out side-by-side comparisons of the patent filings. Ms. Martinez, patent fraud is a serious federal offense. The evidence suggests you attempted to claim ownership of technology you knew you didn't invent. I didn't know about any existing patents, Jessica protested weakly. Sarah never told me she had filed provisional applications. Dr. Chen's expression remained neutral, but his voice carried unmistakable authority. Ms. Martinez, my daughter has been developing these algorithms since her doctoral studies at MIT. The mathematical foundations were established years before you ever encountered this technology. Your daughter? Marcus Webb's confusion was obvious. Dr. Chen, I don't understand the connection to our employee Sarah. Dr. Sarah Chen is my daughter. She holds 3 advanced degrees from MIT, has worked for Google, Apple, and Microsoft in senior engineering positions, and is the legitimate inventor of the medical diagnostic technology that Ms. Martinez has been attempting to steal. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus Webb stared at me with complete shock, clearly trying to reconcile the entry-level developer he thought he knew with the accomplished scientist sitting beside one of the most powerful figures in medical technology. Agent Sullivan continued the presentation. Our investigation has revealed that Ms. Martinez has a pattern of intellectual property appropriation spanning multiple companies and several years. He opened another folder. Biotech Solutions, 2019 to 2020. Ms. Martinez claimed credit for genetic sequencing algorithms developed by Dr. Amanda Foster. Dr. Foster left the company after her work was appropriated, and the technology later failed commercial trials because Ms. Martinez didn't understand the underlying science. Jessica's face went white. That situation was different. Genomic Innovations, 2020 to 2021, Agent Sullivan continued. Ms. Martinez presented protein modeling software as her own invention. The actual developer, Dr. James Liu, filed a complaint with the company's legal department before accepting a position elsewhere. The software was never successfully implemented because Ms. Martinez couldn't provide necessary technical documentation. Rachel Morrison added more documents to the growing pile. Advanced Diagnostics Corporation, 2021 to 2022. Ms. Martinez claimed ownership of machine learning algorithms for drug discovery. The real inventor, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, eventually proved her case through dated development records, but not before. Ms. Martinez had attempted to license the technology to competitors. The pattern was clear and devastating. Jessica Martinez had built her entire career by systematically stealing intellectual property from brilliant scientists who were too focused on their research to properly protect themselves from corporate predators. And now, Dr. Chen said quietly, she attempted the same strategy with my daughter. Unfortunately for Ms. Martinez, she chose the wrong target this time. Marcus Webb found his voice. Dr. Chen, I had no idea about any of these issues. Nexus Technologies has strict policies regarding intellectual property protection. Your policies appear to be ineffective, Mr. Webb. Ms. Martinez was able to claim ownership of revolutionary medical technology, present it to investors as her own innovation, and attempt to file fraudulent patent applications, all while working under your company's supervision. Agent Sullivan leaned forward. Mr. Webb, we need to discuss Nexus Technologies' liability in this situation. Your company facilitated Ms. Martinez's fraud by providing her with corporate resources and official authority to represent technology she had stolen. The implications were staggering. Nexus Technologies hadn't just employed someone who committed intellectual property theft, they had unknowingly become accessories to federal crimes involving technology with potential military applications. What kind of liability are we discussing? Marcus asked nervously. Rachel Morrison consulted her notes. Potential charges include conspiracy to commit patent fraud, corporate facilitation of intellectual property theft, and unauthorized representation of federally protected technology. The penalties could include substantial fines, criminal charges against company leadership, and permanent prohibition from federal contract eligibility. Jessica finally spoke up, her voice desperate. This is all a misunderstanding. I was providing project management and business development services. I never intended to steal anything from Sarah. Dr. Chen's response was swift and devastating. Ms. Martinez, we have comprehensive documentation of your theft. Video recordings of you claiming the technology is your own invention. Email communications where you explicitly stated that the algorithms were developed under your direction. Patent applications where you swore under oath that you were the original inventor. Agent Sullivan added, we also have recordings of investor presentations where you provided detailed technical explanations of technology you demonstrably don't understand, while claiming exclusive ownership rights. Furthermore, Rachel Morrison continued, your pattern of intellectual property theft across multiple companies establishes this as systematic criminal behavior rather than isolated misunderstandings. Jessica looked around the room desperately, searching for any support or sympathy. She found none. What happens now? She asked in a barely audible whisper. Agent Sullivan stood up. Jessica Martinez, you're under arrest for federal patent fraud, intellectual property theft, and conspiracy to defraud investors regarding federally protected technology. The formal arrest was swift and professional. Agent Sullivan read Jessica her rights while Rachel Morrison secured the fraudulent patent applications as evidence. Dr. Chen watched the proceedings with the satisfied expression of someone who had successfully protected his family's interests. As Jessica was led from the conference room in handcuffs, she made one final desperate plea. Sarah, please, we can work this out. I'll give you full credit for everything. I'll pay licensing fees. Just don't let them destroy my life. I looked at her calmly. Jessica, you destroyed your own life the moment you decided to steal from someone whose work you couldn't understand or replicate. This isn't revenge, it's justice. After Jessica was removed, Dr. Chen turned to Marcus Webb with businesslike efficiency. Mr. Webb, Nexus Technologies needs to decide how it wants to proceed. Regarding the medical diagnostic project, my daughter owns all legitimate intellectual property rights, but she's willing to discuss licensing arrangements if your company demonstrates proper respect for patent protections. Marcus Webb was clearly overwhelmed. Dr. Chen, what would appropriate licensing arrangements look like? Exclusive licensing rights for the complete medical diagnostic software suite. $50 million upfront, plus 20% royalties on all revenue generated. Dr. Sarah Chen would serve as Chief Technology Officer for the medical division, with final authority over all technical decisions. The terms were generous but non-negotiable. Nexus Technologies could license revolutionary medical technology that would transform their business, but only under conditions that recognized my ownership and expertise. Additionally, Dr. Chen continued, any employees who supported Ms. Martinez's fraud will be terminated immediately. This company needs to demonstrate that intellectual property theft has serious consequences. Marcus Webb nodded quickly. Of course. We'll conduct a complete review of anyone who was involved in supporting Ms. Martinez's claims. Agent Sullivan returned to the conference room after processing Jessica's arrest. Dr. Chen, the federal investigation will continue for several more weeks as we examine Ms. Martinez's activities at previous companies. We may need additional testimony from Dr. Sarah Chen about the theft timeline and technical details. My daughter will provide whatever cooperation the investigation requires. Dr. Chen replied. Rachel Morrison gathered her documents. The fraudulent patent applications will be officially rejected and flagged in the USPTO database. Dr. Chen's legitimate patents will receive expedited processing to establish clear ownership rights. As the federal officials prepared to leave, Agent Sullivan offered one final observation. Dr. Chen, your daughter's case represents one of the most comprehensive intellectual property protection strategies we've seen. The documentation, the evidence preservation, the strategic patience, it's a textbook example of how to defend against systematic theft. My father smiled proudly. Sarah learned early that in the technology industry, you need to protect your innovations as carefully as you develop them. Too many brilliant scientists have their work stolen by people who understand business better than science. After everyone had left except my father, Marcus Webb, and myself, we discussed the future of the medical diagnostic project. Sarah, Marcus said, his tone completely different from how he had ever addressed me before, I owe you an apology. I should have recognized your qualifications and protected your intellectual property better. Mr. Webb, you treated me exactly as I wanted to be treated, as an invisible junior developer who could work without corporate interference. The problem wasn't your management, it was Jessica's criminal behavior. My father interjected, the important thing now is moving forward appropriately. Sarah's technology represents a genuine breakthrough in medical diagnostics. With proper development and marketing, it could save millions of lives while generating substantial revenue for everyone involved. Marcus Webb nodded enthusiastically. Dr. Chen, I'd like to accept your licensing proposal immediately. Nexus Technologies would be honored to work with Dr. Sarah Chen on commercializing this revolutionary technology. As we finalized the preliminary licensing agreement, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me to this moment. 18 months ago, I had walked into Nexus Technologies as an unknown entry-level developer with a secret plan to develop revolutionary medical software. Now, I was sitting in the same conference room as the Chief Technology Officer of a new medical division, with my father's backing, federal protection for my patents, and Jessica Martinez facing years in federal prison for trying to steal my life's work, the transformation was complete. The theft had been exposed. Justice had been served, but more importantly, my medical diagnostic software would finally receive the proper development and commercialization it deserved, potentially saving countless lives through early cancer detection. Jessica Martinez had thought she could steal my future. Instead, she had inadvertently provided me with the perfect opportunity to build something far greater than I had originally imagined. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being better prepared than your enemies ever expected. 6 months later, I stood in the gleaming headquarters of MedTech Dynamics, watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as construction crews put the finishing touches on the new Advanced Medical Diagnostics Research Center. The building would house the largest medical AI development team on the East Coast, with me as the Director of Innovation and my revolutionary cancer detection software as the flagship technology. The transformation had been extraordinary. What began as a secret project developed in a cramped cubicle at Nexus Technologies had evolved into a multi-billion-dollar initiative that promised to revolutionize early disease detection worldwide. The clinical trials are exceeding every projection. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, no relation to Jessica, reported during our weekly progress meeting. As Chief Medical Officer for the new division, she had been overseeing the implementation of my diagnostic software in 12 major hospitals across the country. The algorithm is detecting stage 1 cancers with 98.4% accuracy, she continued, her excitement obvious. We're identifying diseases 18 months earlier than traditional diagnostic methods. The survival rate improvements are going to be phenomenal. My father, now serving as executive chairman of the Advanced Medical Diagnostics Division, smiled with obvious pride. Sarah, your software isn't just a technological breakthrough, it's going to save hundreds of thousands of lives. The numbers were staggering. Early projections suggested that widespread implementation of my diagnostic algorithms could increase cancer survival rates by over 40% while reducing treatment costs by billions of dollars annually. Major medical centers were competing for early access to the technology. What's the latest on international licensing? I asked Maria Santos, our Director of Global Partnerships. The European Union has approved expedited trials in 15 countries. Japan wants exclusive Asian distribution rights. The World Health Organization is discussing global implementation strategies for developing nations. The scope of success was beyond anything I had imagined during those late nights developing algorithms in my tiny apartment. My software was becoming the foundation for a new generation of medical diagnostic technology, but perhaps the most satisfying aspect of the success was knowing that Jessica Martinez was experiencing a very different kind of transformation. Federal Agent David Sullivan had kept me informed about Jessica's legal proceedings, and the outcomes had been severe but entirely appropriate for the magnitude of her crimes. She pled guilty to 17 counts of federal patent fraud and intellectual property theft, Agent Sullivan had reported during our final interview. The evidence was so comprehensive that her attorneys advised immediate cooperation rather than attempting a defense. Jessica's systematic theft across multiple companies had resulted in a sentence of 8 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Additionally, she faced over $2 million in fines and restitution payments to the scientists whose work she had stolen. Her professional certifications have been permanently revoked, Agent Sullivan continued. She'll never work in technology or business management again. The federal conviction ensures that no legitimate company will ever hire her for any position involving intellectual property. But the personal consequences extended far beyond legal penalties. Jessica's theft had destroyed every relationship and opportunity she had built over the past decade. The BMW was repossessed. The Hamptons vacation home was sold to pay legal fees. Former colleagues and business contacts had completely severed all ties with her. Even her MBA from Wharton had become worthless. The business community had completely ostracized her once the extent of her fraud became public knowledge. Meanwhile, the people who had initially dismissed or underestimated me were experiencing their own reckonings. Patricia from HR at Nexus Technologies had been terminated for failure to properly evaluate employee qualifications and potential. Marcus Webb had kept his position only after implementing comprehensive intellectual property protection protocols and agreeing to annual federal audits. Kevin Walsh, my former cubicle neighbor, had been promoted to senior developer and was now leading the Nexus team that handled basic maintenance for my diagnostic software under our licensing agreement. I always knew you were special, he told me during a recent visit to the old office. But I never imagined you were developing technology that would change the entire medical industry. The irony wasn't lost on me. The cramped cubicle where I had pretended to be an entry-level programmer was now preserved as a company landmark, the place where revolutionary medical technology had been secretly developed while corporate executives remained completely oblivious to its significance. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, my former MIT advisor, had joined our research team as Director of Academic Partnerships. During our first meeting in the new facility, she reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. Sarah, when you turned down those senior positions at Google and Apple, I thought you were making a career-ending mistake. I couldn't understand why someone with your qualifications would choose to work in obscurity at a small software company. I needed the freedom to develop the technology properly, I explained. Large corporations would have assigned oversight teams, demanded regular progress reports, and rushed the software to market before it was ready. At Nexus, I could work without interference and maintain complete control over the intellectual property. Your strategy was brilliant, Dr. Hawthorne admitted. You sacrificed short-term recognition for long-term success. And by documenting Jessica's theft so thoroughly, you created one of the most compelling intellectual property protection cases in recent legal history. The documentation strategy had indeed become a model for other scientists and innovators. Law schools were teaching courses based on my approach to evidence preservation and patent protection. Technology companies had implemented new protocols for monitoring internal intellectual property theft. Most importantly, the case had raised awareness about the vulnerability of brilliant scientists to corporate predators who specialized in appropriating other people's innovations. The Jessica Martinez case has become a cautionary tale throughout the industry, explained Dr. Amanda Foster, the geneticist whose work Jessica had stolen at Biotech Solutions. Dr. Foster had joined our team as Director of Research Ethics after her own experience with intellectual property theft. Scientists are learning to protect their work more aggressively. Patent attorneys are seeing increased demand for provisional filing services. And HR departments are implementing better background screening for employees with access to proprietary research. The broader impact extended to federal policy as well. Agent Sullivan had testified before Congress about the need for stronger intellectual property protection laws, using Jessica's systematic theft as evidence of widespread problems in the technology sector. The Martinez case demonstrated that intellectual property crime is often organized and systematic rather than opportunistic, he had explained to the House Judiciary Committee. We need enhanced penalties and better enforcement mechanisms to protect American innovation from domestic and international theft. New federal legislation was being developed to strengthen patent protections and increase penalties for IP theft. The bill was being called the Sarah Chin Protection Act, in recognition of my role in exposing the vulnerabilities in current law, but beyond the legal and policy implications, the most meaningful aspect of the entire experience was the impact my technology was having on actual patients. Dr. Rebecca Martinez regularly shared stories from the clinical trials that reminded me why I had developed the diagnostic software in the first place. Yesterday, we detected stage 1 pancreatic cancer in a 34-year-old mother of 2, she reported during one particularly emotional briefing. Traditional screening wouldn't have identified the disease for another year, by which time it would have been terminal. Because of your algorithm, she'll receive treatment immediately and has an excellent prognosis for complete recovery. These stories arrived weekly from hospitals across the country. Early-stage breast cancer detected in women whose routine mammograms had shown nothing suspicious. Liver cancer identified in patients with no symptoms. Brain tumors discovered months before they would have caused noticeable effects. Each case represented a life saved, a family preserved, a future secured through early detection and intervention. The personal satisfaction was immense, but the professional recognition was equally gratifying. Medical journals were publishing papers about the breakthrough achievements of my diagnostic algorithms. Technology conferences were inviting me to deliver keynote presentations. International medical organizations were offering awards and honorary positions. The transformation from overlooked entry-level developer to internationally recognized medical technology innovator had been completed, but perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. 3 months after Jessica's sentencing, I received a handwritten letter delivered through the federal prison system. The return address indicated it came from Jessica Martinez herself. Dear Sarah, the letter began, and I could see that her once confident handwriting had become shaky and uncertain. I know I have no right to contact you after what I did, but I wanted you to know that I understand the magnitude of my mistakes. Watching the news coverage of your medical diagnostic breakthrough has made me realize what I was trying to steal from the world, not just from you. Your technology is saving lives. It's advancing human knowledge. It's making the world better in ways I never comprehended when I was focused on claiming credit for your work. I spent my entire career taking credit for other people's innovations. Because I was too lazy and too arrogant to develop my own expertise. I convinced myself that business leadership and strategic vision were more valuable than actual scientific knowledge. I was wrong about everything. You are a brilliant scientist who deserves every recognition you're receiving. The medical breakthroughs, the patent protections, the international acclaim, all of it represents years of hard work and genuine innovation that I tried to steal for my own benefit. I will spend the rest of my life regretting my actions and their consequences. Not just the prison sentence and the ruined career, but the knowledge that I tried to deprive the world of medical technology that could save millions of lives. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand the difference between real achievement and fraudulent appropriation. What you accomplished is genuine greatness. What I attempted was pathetic. Theft. I hope your technology saves countless lives and that your success continues for decades to come. Sincerely, Jessica Martinez. Reading the letter, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Satisfaction at Jessica's acknowledgement of her crimes. Sadness at the waste of a life spent stealing rather than creating. But ultimately, a sense of closure and validation that justice had been properly served. I filed the letter with the rest of my documentation from the case, then returned to the work that truly mattered, continuing to refine and expand the medical diagnostic technology that was already changing the world. As I stood in my corner office at MedTech Dynamics, looking out at the Advanced Medical Diagnostics Research Center that bore my name, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me to this point. Jessica Martinez had tried to steal my future. Instead, she had inadvertently provided me with the motivation and documentation necessary to build something far greater than I had originally imagined. Sometimes the greatest success comes not from avoiding challenges, but from being prepared to turn those challenges into opportunities, and sometimes the best revenge is simply being brilliant enough to turn your enemy's theft into your own triumph. The medical diagnostic software that Jessica had tried to claim was now saving lives around the world, protected by ironclad patents, and generating breakthrough innovations that would benefit humanity for generations to come. My name was on the patents. My algorithms were revolutionizing medicine. My future was secure. Jessica Martinez was just a footnote in the history of intellectual property crime, a cautionary tale about what happens when mediocre people try to steal from extraordinary minds. But I was Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of Innovation at MedTech Dynamics, holder of patents that would save millions of lives, and proof that sometimes the quiet person in the corner cubicle is exactly who you should never underestimate. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.